Hi everyone, welcome to AUREA. Thank you for being here and answering your calling. I'm here with Adam Silberstein. He's an executive coach and he's going to teach us a little bit about how to be excellence-driven entrepreneurs and a little bit about business.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so what do you do exactly?
Yeah. So I work one-on-one. I do executive coaching with startup founders, with CEOs, their C-suites, executives on their C-level, and also work with them, take their teams offsite, take them on exotic locations and do retreat work and kind of work to bring the team together and figure out how to function better as a team.
I love that. So what is one tip that you would give all executives or anyone who's listening to you right now that's just starting up in their business, in their entrepreneurship, to truly work together as a team?
Well, I think, I chose to speak about the importance of psychologically safe spaces and tribes as part of the journey to, let's call it, achieve or aspire your vision, your greatness. And I think having the humility to know that it's not weakness to say that I can't do this alone and that this is hard. Everything that we're doing, you're following your dreams is hard, and this whole adulting world and being responsible, it's a hard thing. And to know that it's okay to do it as a team, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to, um, ask for what you need, because you're human, you deserve it, and whatever's important to you should be important to you too.
Agreed. And I love that part of, it takes humility to ask for help, and to receive that help as well. It's not, we don't have to take it all ourselves to do the job and to do the tasks that we're assigned. Working within a team and especially having that safe space within the team to express those needs is extremely valuable. I come from an environment working in the news industry where that wasn't really valued and that wasn't prioritized. So it never really felt like a safe space for me to express what I needed to be able to deliver the news in the highest quality possible way. So now with my experience being here in AUREA, doing media relations for them, it has been truly rewarding because I'm working with heart-led leaders who are truly empathetic, who are truly compassionate, who allow themselves to express also their needs, where they're struggling, what their challenges are, and how we can all work together to meet them. And I think that's a quality that's difficult to see sometimes in leadership positions, especially in men, usually don't tend to express those vulnerabilities. How do you see that on your field and as you're training CEOs and these high level executives?
100%. Two things that come up for me. One, there's an awesome study that Google did back in 2012, and they wanted to figure out which were the most functional teams and most effective teams. And everything they studied, they found out that actually the teams that created a set of norms to create psychological safety were actually the ones that were most productive, and most functional. So this is Google, a highly analytical culture, who really didn't think that soft part of team cohesion was going to come out of it, and they found out that actually that was the number one input or variable to success on a team. So one, that's just a good case study. Then the question becomes like, what does it take, or how can you create that psychological safe space? And you mentioned a lot of vulnerability. You know, uh, there's all kinds of guidelines that obviously we can go through. But the only thing that came up for me was that I actually totally forgot what came up. The second thing that totally came up for me. I'm sure it'll come up in a
It'll
second.
come back to you. Yeah. And I love that this just happened because this also makes it okay for
Yeah.
us to like, hey, we're having a little bit of Brady fog. Like, let's get back to on topic.
Totally. All day long. And I think what's most important is understanding that the point of a team, right, is to be able to support each other. And this is what I was going to say. I tell my clients all the time that if you don't care about what somebody has to say, if you don't care about their voice, then they shouldn't be on the team. if they're on the team, they have a right to have a feeling, they have a right to have an emotion, they have a right to have an input, they have a right to not be bought in just because you said something. That we can learn something by allowing them to push back, right? So one, creating the space to truly be open to learning, right? If I just listen, what I'm doing is choosing to learn, right? And I'm inviting people to be vulnerable about their ideas. And one thing that Google came out with was during that study was that teams who created that space for psychological safety so that they could surface a concern, push back, without the fear of rocking the boat, the fear of getting pushed back, was actually the definition of psychological safety. Right? It's our teams that are able to do that, the best ideas win versus the strongest personalities and the squeakiest wheels, right? And so I think that's incredibly important. Obviously, there's a big question of like, how do you create that? Right? And that's part of what I do, especially in a short period of time, because we don't have 10 years to build up a beautiful, awesome, trusted relationship, right? One of the big ways that we do it is through vulnerability, as you mentioned, right? Okay. And that's part of what I do is kind of create this space and have people vulnerable. Maybe it's about personal life, and maybe it's about things that are going on in their experience at work. But the other thing is creating a set of norms that we all want to do, right? How are we going to roll? How are we going to respect each other? How do we want to challenge each other? And so when groups have that level of vulnerability and they have those norms, then they have an increased chance they can go into what I call as the productive conflict zone. And so it's funny that conflict is safety. Most people, most teams avoid conflict because either they don't know how to have conflict, they have different conflict cultures. Like for instance, the way that you grew up and there was conflict in your household is totally different than the way that conflict happened in my house. So how are you and I supposed to work together and have conflict and assume we're going to have the same type of conflict and then it's going to go well, right? So as a CEO and as somebody who owns culture, it's actually your job to create the type of conflict that we need to have because we want it to be productive. We want to be able to debate and argue and create alignment through that versus devolve into drama, right? And so what ends up happening, what you probably experienced, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, is that what ends up happening is that the team starts to devolve to artificial harmony. Like you probably stop saying like, well, my voice doesn't fit, right? I'm going to stop speaking my mind. I'm just not going to be, challenging. And then what happens is now you're really in artificial harmony. You're not really expanding. And if we can get people from, I would say most of the world out there, the working world, is in artificial harmony. They say everything's okay, but it's not. And when that's happening is things swell up, and then they blow up into drama. I call it silence to violence, and then they go start all over again. And so my job was actually to take people into conflict so they can then get through it productively and start to build some norms, some lessons, some values as a result of that.
Love that. Something that never changed happened in the news industry.
Sure.
We, especially me, speaking to other journalists, legacy, but used to definitely allow stress, chaos to just build up most of the time. And once it did come time to speak about it with my news director, for example, it was resolved. In fact, one time I remember one of my news directors in the boss said to me, it's okay. Sometimes you just need to vent. And yes, and I also wanted a solution to what was happening. And that wasn't provided. What would be a good example, I guess, from your perspective, to resolve that conflict, right? Like she thought I just was in there doing venting, for example. And what I truly wanted as well was a healthy conflict resolution and a solution to the issue at hand. What would be like a resolution to that, especially when some people don't feel heard about or something.
Great question. So first off, I like to install a no venting culture, which is interesting because it sounds like, wait, you just told us to be vulnerable and open. And well, the thing is that what happens is most people don't know how to deal with their own emotions and process emotions. It is not your coworker's job to process your emotions. If you need to process your emotions, learn how to journal it out, process it out, get a therapist, get a coach, right? Brene Brown does some great work on this, right? She calls herself a vulnerability doctor. And so she says there's a difference between abusive vulnerability and productive vulnerability. I don't remember exactly the term she uses, but it's something like that. And so abusive is saying, I'm going to just let out all of my emotions right now. And I hope that you're able to hold space, even though it could be about you and they could be dangerous, and that somehow you're going to help me work through and produce, process my emotions, right? That's abusive, right? It's not fair, right? And a lot of people, especially a lot of my clients, do this to their spouses. They're super stressed out, they're super busy, and they come home and it's like, well, that's what it should be. Like, no, actually, if you talk to most of my clients' spouses, they, or, high achievers, the person they treat the worst is the people at home because they let off all the crap and all the steam. They would never do that to their board members or to the people understand, right? So, no venting at home either, okay? We need, just like with water, we need to find the channel for it. And that could be peer group that we talked about. It could be coach, could be a therapist, right? So that's number one. I agree with the no venting. So what do we do about productive conflict with that with your boss, for instance, right? It would be very intentional about asking for what you want. Hey, here's what I want, and then presenting it on a already processed emotion, right? And so, for instance, we actually teach. And there's a lot of different styles to do this, nonviolent communication, like stuff like that. For how do I communicate to something that is vulnerable and without being in emotion? This is what Brene, it went off. It was a light bulb with me when she said this. She said, the goal is to talk about the emotion, not from a place of emotion, right? And so if you're able to process it and talk about, hey, you know, as I see it, the facts were that this is what happened, right? And based on that, here's some of my judgments. And here's the emotion that I felt. I felt a lot of anger around that, right? So I'm just talking about it versus being angry, okay? Taking responsibility. My responsibility is like, this is what I could have done better. Maybe I could have talked to you. I could have come to you. And what I want moving forward is that if that were to happen again, what I'd want is for you and I to have meetings prior to this happening. And when we take responsibility and kind of connect in this way, then we both have the opportunity to learn and stretch each other and create more alignment, more buy-in before that, right? And the third piece is we get to create more accountability. We're creating a relationship where, frankly, this is where a lot of managers and leaders miss out, is that actually the most effective accountability in leadership is creating a peer pressure versus top-down accountability or KPIs or OKRs, right? So imagine if you look at like basketball players, they will really be challenging each other on the court, right? You want to play hard, not only because you want to win, but you also don't want to win because you want to win. So we want to create that kind of environment of peer pressure. And what that means is you can't say, oh, you know what, so-and-so in accounting, that's their team, I'm not going to say a word, right? It's more of like, no, you're on my team. I don't care if you're accounting, I'm sales. I'm seeing something over there and I know that can be better. I'm going to challenge you, right? And I want that person to challenge me too if they see something. Because if we're just working in silos, then we're back in that artificial harmony and we're losing that opportunity to challenge each other. So we're going into the conflict.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then part of the aspect of it in
Silence to violence.
silence to violence.
So
That's
it's blowing up, or it's swelling and swelling and swelling until it blows up. And usually people don't go into conflict until until they can't hold it anymore, which is the worst time to do it,
terrible.
right? Because now you're acting like your only little 8-year-old child and having a tantrum, and somehow this extremely complex, disagreement that you want to navigate, how are you going to do it with your worst in your worst state of mind?
I love that. Well, Annie, thank you for your work. It's very
Yeah.
powerful, nurturing, very rewarding. I got beautiful insights, especially on how to continue navigating difficult conversations in the workplace and at home.
Totally.
Relationships.
There's just people.
Connected and finding ways to have excellence driven communication to resolve conflict in the best way possible. So,
So just know, I think the last thing I'll say is know that every single person around you, we all grew up in a different conflict culture. And to assume that somehow we're going to be two people, or even if husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever it is, comes together. My wife, for instance, she grew up in a Catholic Venezuelan background. I'm Jewish Middle East. Total different conflict cultures, right? So to assume that we can come together and achieve a joint goal and have the same type of conflict without being intentional about it is silly, right? So we've had to be very intentional. How do we create conflict so we can get to it productively? And I think that's applicable to anybody. any relationship, any team.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you for answering your call.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching AUREA Leaders.